Hi, my name is Victoria Grayall, and I'm the Director for the Community Engagement and Innovation Division of the Collaborative Research Center for American Indian Health. And today we'd like to present a webinar on planning and funding for a successful research conference. I hope you've had an opportunity to join us last month when CRCAIH held their 5th annual summit, a conference that brought researchers and tribes together to share information about American Indian research in the Northern Plains and what some of the tribes have been able to accomplish in building their capacity to regulate and protect tribal members with the research conducted on their lands. Over the years, the tribal partners had indicated that they would like to conduct an annual conference regarding research being conducted in their communities. CRCAIH proposed that in the 3rd year, they would approach the first tribal partners to consider planning for this research conference. Both Ogallala Sioux Tribe and Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe agreed to this project, and today I would like to share with you some of the lessons learned and key takeaways that may be useful as you consider a tribal research conference. I would like to provide you a quick overview of what we'll discuss today and the purpose of the research conference for local tribal communities. To start, what is the aim or aims for holding a tribal research conference? For our tribal partners, they wanted to, 1, showcase research that was being conducted in their community, 2, increase and develop community awareness and stakeholders supporting research in their community, and 3, strengthen the health career pipeline from high school to college so tribal members who became researchers would return and conduct research in their community. In this presentation, we want to highlight 2 key drivers: importance of planning and funding, because how much effort you put in will determine how much return you and the community will get out of the research conference endeavor. Planning begins with a thoughtful reason for why having a conference, which starts with an encompassing title. Our first 2 tribal partners chose the following titles: Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, Researching, Restoring, and Rebuilding Our Oyate for a Longer Life, and Ogallala Sioux Tribe, No Longer Dreaming, Your Role in Native American Research. Putting together a conference is a major endeavor, and so it takes a time commitment both in the short and long term. And what is the intent? Having a good calendar and a good planning committee will help to make this endeavor reachable. So in creating a planning committee, who will be involved throughout the entire planning and executing of the conference? When we started our committees for the research conferences that the tribes had conducted, it involved the Ogallala Sioux Tribe, the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, and also the Collaborative Research Center for American Indian Health. So we had 3 committees set up, 1 for each of the tribal communities, and then the overall CRCAIH group with each of the tribal liaisons were designated to be on the CRCAIH committees. And we started planning approximately 18 months out, and we were meeting about every 2 weeks, usually by email or conference call. And here's some questions that maybe you would think about while you're preparing. You have your title, and now you realize this is a major project that requires many skills, many hands, and time and organization. So who will be your group to start with this process? What kind of time will be needed to accomplish the tasks involved? How much will it cost? How many people do you need now, and how many will you need the day of or days of the conference? And how many people are you expecting to attend? And how will you let people know that you want them to attend this conference? Who are your audience, and who will be your presenters? So your planning committee can be as simple as 1 or it could be broken down into terms of the key tasks that you need to have accomplished and the hands-on that you need involved with this. So in terms of thinking about the planning committees, if you initiated it yourself, think about what you want in terms of membership and what kind of committees do you need to help make the conference run smoothly and be successful. Possible committees to consider when planning the conference are best to define early on and to begin organizing these within the first month that you're starting your planning. So some of those could be as far as if you have a website and how you may utilize it for promotion of the conference, financing and fundraising, whether or not you're using looking at paper submissions of presenters to identify to be your speakers at the conference, if you're having a poster session for the conference, and as well as if there's any type of where your conference is being held in terms of the locale and location, and so those things such as registration and accommodations, what's available in terms of tourist attractions if people are coming in early, what's needed for your speakers and for companies that may be vendors, as well as the catering, parking, tables and chairs, audio-visual needs. So all of these can either be broken down or grouped together based on what's convenient and workable for your project. Think about also, are there any policies or procedures that are already in place that are set by the tribe? Do they have any requirements such as vendor agreements or use agreements that need to be completed, or policies in terms of what's expected if such a conference would be held on tribal land? The committee wheel is what we put together to kind of just visually explain how some of these committees can work together in terms of getting you to being your tribal research conference. So these are so the first committee should be well thought of as the movers and shakers and detailers of your organization or community. So when you think about who can organize such an event, who are the people that come to mind? So some of those people could be within your organization or people outside that work in the community. One example would be when you have a powwow group and that committee, you know, who are some of those people that have skills that you could be utilized in terms of promotion or for fundraising or budget. They would be good to be part of your committee as well. So looking at the wheel, location is usually the next step once you have your title, is where is this conference going to be held and what day will it be held, and then how are you going to pay for it kind of comes as a natural consideration. And then if you're having a poster presentation to bring your researchers in from your community, are they the local ones that are occurring right now and in current research, or are they also some of the ones that you could maybe go back for 5 years in terms of if they've completed their research and now you could share and disseminate their research here within the community? Some other things to think about is also your audio-visual support. Are there any policies? Again, always keeping in mind, do you need vendor agreements or speaker agreements to be completed? And how the committees would each have a role in putting those together for you. So we think about the theme of the conference. When we're thinking as a research conference, we're thinking in terms of what the science is or what the research. So some of the things you might want to do is highlight your local tribal researchers. So those may be the tribal members that already are conducting research in your community, or perhaps they're at a university outside the area, but you'd like to invite them in to share their research with their tribal membership. Think again in terms of, as you think of the theme, is to get the right people that will be maybe think of them as the best in their field and those who would be the best for your audience. And choose a topic for the conference and map it to the needs of your target audience. Start early and send, if you're thinking of using a general call for papers and having the researchers present what their research topic is, and then have a committee that would review and select those speakers to be presenters at your conference. Consider that you'd have to start early to send out a request and call for papers, and then you need the time for the committee to actually select the presenters, and then to develop the agenda that would include these speakers. So you're looking at possibly anywhere from 18 months to the first year, a year out, in terms of having that call for papers out to the public. And again, I'd like to share with you too is not only, your current research may not be able to have the data that they want to share with the community and disseminate at this point, but think about the research that's just been completed, and this is where perhaps your research office then would be able to give you some of that information of who are research projects that completed in the last 5 or 7 years, and consider inviting them back to present their data and disseminate it within the community. When planning your conference, then remember to choose the right date and location, and think about weather. What does that have to do with your conference? Well, if it's snowing and transportation, you may lose your audience, or you may lose your speakers being able to be there on time and participate. So think about the weather. Think about your location. Think about your what other conferences or meetings or tournaments that may take away from the audience that you want to attend your conference. Also, what other impact, if there's other symposiums going on, will that impact the audience that you want to have. The other thing is location. In regards to how easy is it to get in and out of the community where you're having the conference. What about if there's air travel involved for some of your speakers? How far away is the nearest airport, and are there people that can accommodate and assist the speaker to get to the conference and hotel with this type of distance that may be in his or her travel? The other thing is just the whole registration for the conference, whether or not you're considering doing an online registration, or whether you need to have it done manually, or even if you're going to do it registration at the time of the conference itself. Also, some other things that probably you would be thinking about too is having a brochure or your program or event booklet to have ready and available for at the time of registration, so that people can have an idea of what the agenda is like and who will be participating, and also what your expectation or number of attendees that you expect, and then whether or not you're actually going to have a certificate of attendance or a verification of attendance that for some of your audience may be able to get credit for attending their conference if they belong to certain professional societies or memberships. You want to create what we call as a balanced agenda. So how long are you planning to have your conference? Is it 1 day, 2 days, day and a half? What about your speakers? Are you having some speakers that are more local, or are they long distance, and or a keynote speaker that might be at the national level, and then all of your local researchers could be available to present at your conference. So there's a lot of different ways that you could have your speakers present. And then, as I said earlier, you might also call for presentations and then have maybe groups, or are you going to have them broken into smaller workshops where you have a few all the audience together, and then they break out into smaller groups of workshop time that could share some of their information on a more closer to a one-to-one level. And also, is there time for socializing? Are there adequate break times and meal times? Will they have time to visit the poster sessions during the conference, or are you going to set aside a time specifically for people to go through and view the various posters that you're having? And are you going to foster social networking? One of the things that was talked about was, how can I increase more participation from the community regarding the importance and the value of research? And so is there a way that can be made as a way of networking? Will there be leadership available who can talk on how their expectations of the type of research and issues that they have concerns about regarding data or types of research that's being conducted on the land? Also, what is available for students from high school through college? Will there be representations from various universities that promote the research training that these students might have interest in regarding health or prevention? So there's a lot in terms of creating a good agenda and allowing time for a lot of interaction between the community and the research presenters. Well, now we get down to the nitty-gritty. You need money to have the conference, and so this probably, in terms of your planning, will go hand in hand, starting from the initial day that you put together your committee, and you start talking about how is this going to be funded. Sometimes you have a lot of opportunities, and so I'm going to kind of maybe not just talk about some key ways of getting funding. And the first way that I'm going to share with you is what we did with the two tribal partners, with the what we call the R13 grant, which was a conference grant that we received through the National Institute of Health and the National Institute of Minority Health and Health Disparities. And with that, it was a $50,000 grant that was divided, $25,000 for Cheyenne River and $25,000 for Oglala to put on their conference. And that may seem like, wow, that should cover everything, but it doesn't, because there's certain requirements and restrictions that were there, and so other avenues of funding also had to be considered. And so some of those things you need to think about, and when you're reading different grants and different requirements for funding, those are the things you need to look into. And one of the main things, because of our way, we always want to feed everybody, and so that's one of the number one things that the grant would not cover was food expenses, and it wouldn't pay for swag or the pens and pencils and pads and bags that are always the things that people are looking for when they're coming to a conference in order to carry their things with them. So some of the ways that you can offset those costs are either to possibly have a registration fee, or invite vendors and have a vendor's fee. And then the other way is like with sponsors or small grants, either contacting companies, organizations, academia, other research professional societies, American Indian Alaska Native organizations or groups, such as the American Indian Education Group, tribal colleges and foundations. Those are just some. And if you have a good online person and social media, there's also crowdsourcing ways to do fundraising as well. And that was one way that Cheyenne River was able to raise money, was they actually did a crowdsourcing and received donations that way. But if you do a proposal, you need to look at the timing, when it's due, and when the earliest or when they would fund. So your calendar date for your conference needs to be pretty close to those time frames that they have. And usually, like the R13, it was for 1 year, so we had to have it broken down so that we had time a few months after the workshop or the conference. Then going back, then we had our conference. We had one in May and one in March, and then we actually got funded in September of the following year. So even though those grants were, the grant was funded in September, and then we started pretty much off that way, although we had said at the time that we were actually writing the proposal that they should be start fundraising now, because we may not even be considered for the grant. So if we would not have gotten the grant, then if you had that we would have to be looking for other sources of money. So that's, it's one of those things. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. It's look for a variety of sources of funding and how that will help. And so that's where you need a good committee on fundraising to assist you. Now we put together some a workbook that has spreadsheets in them. The one that talks about making a budget, and they're in they're Excel spreadsheets. And then we have one with a calendar, and then also one for your different committees and tasks that you want them to accomplish at certain on a monthly basis on that. And I'd recommend, and we'll be talking about it later on, about how important that communication among all your committee members, and having either, depending on if committee members, there may, people wear different hats, and there may be an overlap of some of your memberships being in 2 or 3 of your committees. But depending on how it's organized and how you feel comfortable moving forward with those, we hope that these spreadsheets will help you to stay on task with what you need to do. And then when you also think about with your budget and that, think about when do you need cash for the conference. Some things you're going to have to pay up front, and they may be you need that cash 2 or 3 months before the conference actually starts. Some you may need cash while the conference is going on. There may be some people that they want their pay, if you're paying an honorarium or something, before they leave the conference. So be sure that you have you work with your finance officer on when those checks will be available and what the time frames are for that, and then what things are going to be paid post-conference. And again, that's where your vendor agreements and your invoicing and purchase order policies and stuff come into being aware of those, and what your finance committee can keep you abreast of what's needed. And always, the thing is we're always trying to be prepared, and it's always good to be as prepared as you can be, but there always could be an emergency or something unexpected could happen. And one of those things is that there's sometimes speakers can have unavoidable that they can't attend, and so do you have a backup for that speaker that he may or not be able to present at this time? So do you have a way that you can either have another speaker come in, or and do a presentation or another type of activity or workshop that could be filling that space. Also, you never know how many people want to hear a certain speaker, so you may have your room as a certain level of attendance, and you may need additional chairs or room space, and so do you have the flexibility to accommodate those size changes. And then if there was an accident or emergency, do you have a way for people at the registration desk or within the hall to contact, know who to call and to contact in case of that? And then is there sufficient staffing at all times to accommodate traffic issues in terms of moving the group around, or dealing with questions and answers, dealing with any kind of assistance? What about handicap accessibility and availability? Are there ramps for people that may be in wheelchairs so they can move around to your facility and to attend the conference comfortably? Other considerations are to think about too is in regards to parking and handicap parking. Are there special dietary needs? Be sure to book your audio-visual well in advance, and then be sure to follow up within the last 2 weeks before to confirm that they still have you on the calendar, that they're going to provide those audio-visual needs that you had requested early on. Also, do you need timekeepers or microphones, additional seating in the different rooms that you may have for your conference, or in the larger room? And then do you have just break spaces for the audience to take a break from the presentations and just kind of sit back and relax and maybe casually visit or network with others in a comfortable space? And what about childcare for women, men and women who come with their children, and that may be, most cases, most people are have childcare, but in some instances they don't. And so, is there a connection that you can make so that there's a way for child care services? That was one nice thing for both conferences. They were able to provide that. One they had where they actually had some of the college staff that was there that actually set up an area for the kids to be taken care of right near the conference hall. And then at the other one was that we had the daycare not too far away from the facility, and the parents could drop their kids there and utilize that for the day that they were at the conference. Also, to think about just some, just those easy things such as light bulbs for the projector, extension cords. Again, these are audiovisual or computers. Catering. What about your snacks and beverages? Is there something, will there be water and coffee available throughout the conference, or will it be on a time thing in terms of your breaks? So just, there's just little things to think about, and they all affect the budget, and they all affect the planning in those committees. So, you just work it over and move forward. But, there's always some little ones that you may not pick up until the day of, and that. But like I said, the best you can do is to really take a concerted effort to be a good planner. Have some good people that like to deal with details, and get them on board and help to make your conference run smoothly. So the other thing is what's the impact that you want to leave? Do you want to leave people with feeling like they were totally uncomfortable with the conference, things didn't run smoothly, or it was too cold or too hot? Or do you want them to leave with the message of that there's good research happening in your community? You have some top-notch tribal researchers here, and there's some really significant things that are happening here that should be known nationally because of the good works that are being done. So the one way to think about it is, what are 3 things do you want the audience to take home? And to help reinforce that, I'd recommend that you try to include those 3 things in your welcoming of the audience to your conference, and then reinforce it when you close your conference, so that when they go home that they're thinking about those 3 things and how it impacted them and what made that conference significant and lasting. The other thing to think about too is, there's always people saying, well, where can I get a copy of the presentation? I really enjoyed what this researcher had to say, and I really would like to get more of the information that she presented. So that's something that you can have in your brochure or in your registration packet. About how they can access the presentations. If they're online, they can download them, or whether or not to contact you, and you would either email the presentation to them, or whether or not you're actually going to have copies made available at the conference themselves or within their notebook or on a USB that would have all the presentations listed. And then when you're, with all good things, you want to know how well you did. And so that's where this evaluation piece or survey to assess your impact. So you want to be sure to ask the questions about how each speaker performed, as well as the content of the material, and then how well the overall conference was, and what ways that you could do better for the next time, and that and encourage them to write and be honest and helpful to you to have to improve your conference. Also, at the end, you're probably going to think about well, what do we do after the conference? And so some of that is, you may have an attendance roster, and so we, in regards to the evaluation, you may not do the evaluation right at the end of the conference. You may want to wait a couple days and contact them by email and ask them to complete an electronic evaluation after the event, and just be sure to remind them that email would be coming out to them to fill that out. You also want to be sure and send thank you notes to everybody that assisted you in making this a successful event. And then you would also like to do a debriefing with all your committee members and begin planning for the next one, and also prepare your final budget to know how much, whether or not you broke even, which you want, and hopefully not be in the red in any of your budget items, and that you have maybe a little cushion that you can start planning for the next conference. In closing, then, I'd like to share with you that we had our tribal partners had more than just the 2 conferences. We were able to Turtle Mountain was able to hold their conference just this year regarding data matters, working together better. And so it was a very good conference in terms of talking about presenting the data within their community of some of the projects that the Tribal Nations Research Group has been involved in with the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians. So, and also I want to also acknowledge the Spirit Lake Nation, who also was where we held our 4th year summit, and their tribal college or community college also held a research conference the day after the CRCAIH Summit in 2016. So there's been 4 research conferences going on amongst our tribal partners. And these programs can also provide you with additional information and support. So please contact them through the CRCAIH website that has a listing for their contact info, or contact us here at SEED, which follows, our address follows on the next slide. And thank you for your attendance. Thank you.